To all who shall see these presents, greetings. Ruckdog Gaming here, and this is Ruckdog with my first Satisfactory video. This is a video I've been wanting to make ever since we got news that Update 5 for Satisfactory is going to be incoming here, at least on the experimental track, at the end of the month. What this is going to be is a tour of my Satisfactory Update 4 save that I've been working on, really for about the last 6-7 months, ever since Update 4 hit the experimental build. And as such, we're going to be taking a little bit of a trip around the world. Before we get into that, however, I do want to mention that we are looking at some spoilers here. So, for those of you that don't know, Satisfactory has the same map every time. You do have different areas of the map that you can start in, different starting locations, okay? But don't let that confuse you like it did me. That means there's actually different maps. It's all one big unified map. All of the resources are in the same place. All of the pathways and roads are in the same location, so on and so forth. It's just that they start you in different areas of the map, depending on how much of an initial challenge you want to have. And so, that being the case, if you haven't played the game and are really interested in it, you will be getting spoiled on some of the resource locations, etc., as we go through this video. So, just wanted to make sure that was out there at the start, so that people can turn back now if they don't want to be spoiled. Okay, everybody knows that spoilers are ahead, so here we go. So, this is the overview. This is the map that is generated by the excellent Satisfactory Calculator website. I'll post a link to that in the description below. And what you're seeing here is, a few things. So the blue lines you see going everywhere, those are power lines. That's where I've got my power network put in. These black lines you see right here, these are foundations. Okay, and so these are the quote-unquote roads that I've built in various places. And these pink lines here, that's all my rail network. And of course, this bloom right here is indicating where there's radiation. So, as you might expect, that is where my nuclear power plant and waste processing is located. So, we're going to start here in the starter base. I put my starter base into this location up here, which is Northern Shore, Northern Forest. And that is the second starting area. Down here you've got the green fields, you've got the desert, and then you've got, I think it's the jungle starting area that's, if I remember right about here. Those are sort of your different starting options. So I did my first game down here, and this is my second game, so I started up here. Now, when I started this game, I had a few things I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to make more use of trains, which I accomplished there. I wanted to get all the way to the final tier, which I did. And I also wanted to dabble a little bit with nuclear power, which I did here. So, to a large degree, I accomplished all of the things I set out to do with the save, so I feel pretty good about that. Now, as I mentioned a second ago, we're going to be stepping chronologically through the bases I built, the factories I built. This is not necessarily going to be a geographical order because I bounced around a bit in parts of the map, but it should give a good feel overall for the types of things I built in what order. That's sort of the goal. All right, so first up, here's a little bit of a zoom in. We're going to be talking about the starter base I built, and then the first coal plant that I built up here in these crater lakes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through a short video that was made that I took from my game, and I'll sort of talk us through as we go. So we're going to take a look at the starter base first here. Okay, so here's the starter base. As you can see, I've got a good-sized starter base. This empty platform is where the space elevator was. You can see here as we're flying over, these are all of the various starter nodes that I was using as inputs for primarily copper, concrete, and iron. Now, I had set up an idea where I would have a bottom floor for logistics, and then each successive floor would be progressively more complex in terms of manufacturing. We'll get to that in a little bit more detail here in a second. This blank area right here is where my hub used to be. I've since moved it to a different base. This whole area right here was my shopping mall, so to speak, where I would have all my production, and like I said, this is where my space elevator was, which I've also moved to a new base. Now you see this belt construction here. This is essentially going to a train station that's taking everything over to the new headquarters base I built. It's just designed to sort of keep the storages here empty. A little bit of a band-aid because it means that everything is still getting produced and transported to the main base here. It just now has an intermediate step before it gets to the headquarters. Now, as we move over to the side of the base here, we have my train station. I've got an input station, and I also have what I call a workstation, which is where my work train usually parks that I use to travel around the map. And as we can look here, we also got a better view about how I've got the constructors, and I've got the manufacturers, and up top I've got the full-on, manufacturers, assemblers on the middle level. Back here at the back of the base, we have a couple of truck stations that are more or less abandoned in place, because I was doing truck logistics to various parts of the map early on before I got trained. I also had a little bit of a hypertube network between a few of my key bases, and some good old felt spaghetti here for sorting out various things. Not exactly proud of how that came out, but that is what it is. Okay, so here we go back to the overview. We've taken a look at the starter base. Now we're going to go ahead up and take a look at my coal plant. So this was my first coal plant, and of course this is a big deal because this was my first real automated power setup. I'm using a single coal node for this. I had another coal node there that I never actually tapped into. And so you've got the coal belt, and you've got the piping network. And you'll notice that I'm basically between every couple of the coal plants, I'm putting the pipes in to make sure they don't run out of water. That's a tricky thing with these coal plants, is making sure they all have enough water. Okay, so the next item on the list here is the oil base. So once I got my coal power up, that's when I started moving over and trying to get my oil production up. You'll see that I built a power plant here, and I also built a production facility. And then later on, I added a rail network station for transporting products and pass-through as well. All right, so here's my oil products. This is where plastic and rubber and fuel are all being produced. For a while, I was transshipping it to the main base via truck. But eventually, once I got trains up, I put in a train station. And then the oil-fired power plant, is now located over here. And that's using most of the rest of the oil in the area. You'll notice I've got my big, huge train ramp coming down from the upper levels of the map. And you're seeing some oil products along the belt here, and that's just because I'm processing the byproducts of making fuel for those power plants into useful products. Yep, like I said, big old ramp up to the upper part of the base, and you can see where I've got my space elevator up there now. And then, of course, the trains and the bypass for the main route. And that, of course, is the station there I've got primarily for my export of oil products. All right, well, that'll about do it for the oil setup here. All right, so the next thing I've got is something that I call the Valley Complex. Okay. This is a series of different facilities that I sort of have co-located in a single place. We have a steel plant that's generating most of the steel ingots I use back at the main factory, or my starter factory. And of course, since I'm using coal for that, I had enough coal left over to run a couple of coal generators, so I've got a small power plant there. Initially, that coal power plant was powering just the steel plant, but eventually I tied it back into the rest of my grid. We have what I call a munitions plant, which is where I'm producing things like the Noblest charges and my rifle ammo. A computer factory, which was the first area I have for my computer production. Then we've got a couple of facilities that are really there to support primarily the computer factory, but also chip into a few other places. We've got a oil-fired plant for additional power and also producing some plastic and rubber. Then we have a steel and copper plant that's taking advantage of a few pure nodes that are located right there on that plateau where the factory is. And so all that together is what I'm referring to as my Valley complex. And of course we have a train station right there sort of in the middle of this shot here that is what's transshipping this stuff in and out of the area. All right, so looking back, you can see there at the bottom we've got the steel facility, and then here's that coal generating area that's taking advantage of some excess coal from those nodes over there. Off in the distance, you can see the oil products and the oil plants. Then just over that hill is the copper and steel. My red and black building right here is my armory that's producing my explosives and other type of things. And as we follow the train lines around here, you'll see that we go up the hill to this big platform that I built like a table over that valley area there, and that is my computer production facility there. Got various different things being built on different floors in that one. This is that iron and copper facility that I was talking about earlier. Using that to produce both ingots and a couple of finished things like screws, as you can see. And then this bridge that goes way off in the distance there is heading over towards that oil facility. Again, just providing a few things I need, like plastic for circuit boards and that type of thing. This just goes across this little valley here, and then down to the floor of this desert area. And that's where we're producing oil and our power for this facility. Again, originally this was a little bit of an island unto itself as far as power goes, but eventually I did tie it back into the rest of my power grid thanks to the train tracks, so it didn't need to be as independently powered as it used to. Okay, so next up is what I'm calling the lake complex. This was where I got my aluminum production up and running. And also I built a sizable oil power plant because there's an oil node in this area. And then finally I also built an advanced electronics factory. By advanced I mean it's things like the radio control units and the supercomputers, that type of thing. Okay, so right in front of us is the oil plant setup for power. And then the enclosed building there is our advanced electronics. And then beyond that is where the aluminum production is at. We'll head over there and take a closer look. So again, building different components on different floors is kind of how I have this thing set up, with the supercomputers being built by the manufacturers on the top floor there. This is my aluminum setup. It's a bit... well, I mean, it's not disorganized, it's just not, prettified. I never did get around to really enclosing this. But this is a full bauxite belt coming in and using the standard aluminum processes, no alternate recipes. I didn't have any at the time that I built this factory. This is about what you get to max out that one full belt of like 780 units of bauxite coming into the factory. And it was pretty much sufficient for my aluminum needs well through the mid-game into the early end-game, if that makes sense. But in retrospect, I probably should have tried to bring in more bauxite, probably about double at least the production here, whether that's just a second floor built onto this or what. Probably needed more aluminum by the end of it than I thought. Okay, so next up is what I'm calling the crater complex down here in the corner of the map. We had nitrogen added to the game in Update 4, so this is where I exploited that. And this is where I produced things like my fused modular frames and the turbo motors, and yet even more oil power. There's a number of oil nodes here. You can see these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 oil nodes. I tapped all of those and made a sizable oil power plant on the bottom floor of this facility here. So let's take a look. Okay, so off in the distance is where the nitrogen is coming from. I'm actually transporting it into these facilities by train. That's probably a little bit of silly overkill. I probably could have gotten away with actually just running a pipe all the way in, but like I said, part of this save was me wanting to play with trains more, so trains it was. And then this back here, starting at the very bottom, is where we have the oil-fired power plant. You can see the water extractors there for things like fuel production that are bringing water up into this facility. Most of the oil is going towards fuel production. I do have some plastic and rubber production going based off of byproducts, but this was really sort of like the last major push I needed to get over the hill and into my nuclear production is coming from this plant right here. Up here on top is where we're producing the turbo motors, heat sinks, and the like, and all of those are then getting outputted down to the train stations on the middle level. As you can see, those are the train stations down there. This facility over here was pretty much all fused frames. You can see I was also producing motors and bringing those across this valley on a belt, all the way down to the turbo motor production. Another thing I was producing in the factory with the motors was some electromagnetic control rods. Electromagnetic control rod production was also going on over there. So, altogether, these were two of the biggest facilities I built up to this point in my game, and that is the crater. All right, so next up is the Greenfields facility. This is where I was mostly producing my batteries. That was the focus of this production here. I did have a small iron ingot plant that was producing lots of iron ingots, and I was sending those over to my nuclear facility, which we'll cover after this. But for the most part, this is where my battery production is going on. All right, so here's my battery plant. There's the ingot plant. So we have the train stations down here, including the ones that are transporting the ingots. Had a little bit of a logistics level right here, which is just where I had my few things for belts to come into. Then here we have sulfuric acid production. We've got alumina solution production, actual aluminum production itself. I was producing the aluminum parts I needed for the batteries here on site. Then we have the actual battery production, and then finally export via drone here on the top floor. And this drone is taking the production batteries over to my new base, which I built up on top of the mountain plateau in the red forest. So as this guy takes off, we can follow him over and sort of see the direction he's headed. You see also, you sort of get a sense for a little bit of the road and rail network that I had built. So way up there on the hill, that is the new headquarters base I built. We'll take a look at that eventually as well. You can see a couple of support things I've got out here, various nodes to bring the materials I needed for my battery plant in. As we turn around, we'll get another good look at the blenders. Yep, there we go. I've got 5 blenders basically working flat out producing batteries, and that's proven sufficient for my needs. I'm not really using tons of batteries. Oh, and I sort of managed to build this factory in the flight path of that Sky Manta Ray thing, so he flies through the factory on a regular basis. Right, so here's headquarters. This is the new headquarters building that I built to have sort of a fancy headquarters at the end of the game. It's got my item spine in it. It's got my space elevator now. And a little bit of space elevator item production. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so here we go. So we've got our rails leading up into the lower level, which is where I've got my stations at. A little bit of production going on here. The platform for this one is about 40 by 40. I think it's actually like 43 by 43. So it's a good sized little facility. Got a fair bit going on in it. This here is actually all copper dust production. I had a little sort of transportation control tower with my main power end switch for the facility. Going up to the next level, we're going to see all kinds of belt work for the item spine that I built. I built this in 2 iterations. This one here has the smart splitters only outputting 1 item per smart splitter and then go into overflow, and this one over here has a string of smart splitters that is outputting in 2 directions, although for right now they're really only using 1 side. And then this is my new item mall. You notice I went with a small control or small containers for this one. Just from experience, I noticed I wasn't ever fully emptying the large ones for the projects I was doing, so I decided to use smaller ones for this. Underneath these glass foundations, I had a belt system that was just going to display various sets of items. Never quite got around to finishing that. I've got a central tower here, and I should bear in mind none of this is like completely finished. I was going to eventually enclose all this. And then here we've got space elevator and space elevator production. But this platform up here is where I was eventually going to put my hub as we take our hypertube elevator all the way up. It's going to be a little bit of a ride, I'm afraid. The original vision for this is I was going to have this really nice like penthouse apartment type thing going on where I'd be able to sit on a walkway at the edge and look out over the world and the whole bit. But unfortunately, what I discovered was that thanks to the fog, you really don't see too much up here. It's mostly just a foggy blankness. So that part didn't work out so well. Might have to look at doing the commands to turn off the fog and that type of thing. But anyway, this was the idea. Never quite finished it. All right, so we'll take the shortcut back down here. Yeah. All right. So anyway, this part of the accelerator, that's for the nuclear pasta for the space elevator and that type of thing. Here's the drone port over here that's coming in to grab batteries. That's where all the batteries that are being outfitted by my factory are coming in at. Over there you can see some bauxite. That's right now just pulling bauxite and taking it over to the factory. You can see that I never quite finished the upper levels here. Yeah, this whole headquarters thing was maybe a little bit of an overambitious project. As you can see, I never really got much past the initial starting stages for it, but that's still sort of up and functional. I've got some initial capability going on that. All right, so last but not least, let's talk about the nuclear plant. This was an effort. I really wanted to, like I said at the beginning of the video, try out nuclear power. So I've got a single uranium node that's inside the cave that's under a waterfall here in the swamp area, providing me with my uranium. And then we've got the plant that's producing, really there's a lot of effort just going into producing fuel rods and of course the water supply that we've got here. So let's take a look. Here we are approaching the nuclear plant. We are right by my little control tower that I built. That control tower is just outside the radiation field, so that is a little safety feature there. Off in the distance there, you can see the train as it goes through the waterfall into the cave. In fact, there it's got the uranium in it. Very bottom level here, we've got our transportation inputs, and then we've got 2 levels of production that are going into doing the various things, and of course our control tower here. So we're going to go up and take a little look inside the control tower. I do have various switches in here wired up to allow me to turn various things off and on. The trains for the water, uranium mine has a separate switch back here. There's a main power out. But yeah, there you go. This is a 30 by 30. The upper floor has all of the nuclear plants and the waste processing on it. All right, so there we go. That is an overview of my Satisfactory Update 4 world. Gotta say, this has been a heck of an effort. Learned a lot by building all of this, and I really feel like I've sort of gotten a handle on a lot of bits and pieces of the game that I didn't have before I started. Remember, this is only my second playthrough of the game, so there was still quite a bit of learning and things I hadn't quite figured out how to do when I started this game. So, already looking forward to getting back into Update 5 and starting to work the game from there. I will say that I'm probably going to completely start over for Update 5 for a few reasons that I'll probably save for another video. Yeah, I think this is probably... This video here is also going to serve as a little bit of a send-off for Update 4. I do have a couple of other videos planned where I want to talk about a few things that are in this world, but for the most part, yeah, I think it's pretty much as far as it's going to get as far as the level of development goes. So, okay, well, thanks for watching. if you have any inputs or questions or issues on this video, or some other things you'd like to see me talk about, or questions you've got about anything you saw, let me know. And in the meantime, this is Ruck Dog saying good luck and good hunting.